Oh my, what a pleasant Monday, the 11th of August it is. Greg Sher with you here on One on One. And joining me now is someone that knows numbers very well and so much more, Chief Economist from Cotality and SVP, Dr. Selma Hepp. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, Greg. Thanks for having me.
It's an honor to have you, actually. I met you at a dinner table, which, how do two people at a mortgage company who have never met before end up at a dinner table? We can thank the people at Housing Wire for that, for putting on that dinner. It was great to meet you briefly, and you spoke at that conference. And before we get into the housing numbers, big day for you. 30 years in this country as of yesterday, the 10th. What a milestone.
It is. It is. I can't believe that it's been so many years, actually. I'm still in awe about everything that happened over the last 30 years and then how things have changed, over this time as well for people coming in and what I've been able to accomplish. It is very special. Thanks for making a note of it.
Of course, of course. Well, let's get into some numbers that aren't as attractive as you being here for 30 years. There's a lot of bad, but there's also a lot of good. There's a lot that's starting to look a little bit rosier in the housing market, and I think we'll probably start with with a positive, and that is that you feel like there's a healthier environment right now, and that first-time home buyers, it's heading in a better direction anyway. Why do you feel that way?
Well, during the pandemic, it was so hard to buy for a lot of people. There was bidding wars everywhere. You had to plan on spending X amount more than you had, budgeted initially because you were bidding against other people, and a lot of them were cash buyers, and inventory was very tight. And it's very different now. We have a lot more inventory in many markets in the country, not as much competition, so you kind of have more predictable range of your budget is in more predictable range. It's just, and the rate of home price appreciation has slowed. So that too helps with that, predictability. I think all of that up until this point, all we talked about is how unaffordable things were and how much the balance was in favor of sellers. And we're now finally seeing that shifting. And that's, to me, is encouraging.
Yeah, and we've got several elements working in the favor of the buyer who finally now has some control. Now, wages aren't where we probably want them to be. Rates aren't probably where we want them to be. And I've heard you say in the past that you need 2 out of those 3 factors to really start making inroads on this affordability problem. What do you think of those 3? What do you think are the 2 most likely to come in, sooner than later?
Well, home prices are already working in a favor of affordability simply because, the rate of appreciation at the moment is lower than the rate of inflation. So in essence, you're having real home prices declining. That helps affordability. The other thing is that even with wages having slower growth than during the pandemic, they're still growing at about 4% range. So they're growing faster than home prices. So that helps affordability. One thing that's not helping affordability, unfortunately, is mortgage rates. But we are seeing some improvements there too, especially like last couple of weeks. Mortgage rates have been coming down. It is one of those things that's up and down, depending on the day. But at least we have 2 out of 3.
Yeah, well, they're not getting to the area where it really moves the needle in a substantial way. There's a little shot in the arm with refis, and then the bond goes back up.
Yeah.
As of Friday, the bond was hovering just under 430. What is that range in your eyes that it needs to get to really turn the tables and make a big difference?
Well, in terms of the mortgage rates alone, I think, coming below 6%, so any combination of bond and spread, that brings us to the 6% range, I think would be helpful. Every time mortgage rates did approach 6%, we saw a boost in activity, and not just from refi, but also purchase applications. So I think anywhere 6 and below, I think we're in a much better, we're looking at a much better outlook.
So I made an argument recently that I caught a lot of flack for, and that was that we need a pretty substantial correction in the prices of houses for the affordability problem to get better. And I'm not talking about where we are right now. 3 years ago was at 24%, and then last year was at 4% appreciation. This year it'll be somewhere around flat, but that is not enough. And I feel like we need at least another 10% to get us to a place where people really start to act and sell, and then you get buyers off the couch to say, you know what, I can afford that. Now, I got a lot of pushback from people saying that would be terrible. That's catastrophic. You should never wish for that. You're a lender. Your investors won't be happy hearing you say that. But you're the economist. I'm not. In my eyes, I see this very clearly as just the normal cycle, like the evolution of a cycle from peak to trough. Do you see it differently? And do you agree that we need something more substantial than where we are right now to bring affordability more in focus, but as it relates to home prices?
I'm 100% with you on this. I actually am in the middle of writing my little, monthly piece, and I was going to call it, we can't have our cake and eat it too, because I really feel like to get anywhere in terms of better affordability, we really do need home prices to come down more, we would need home price. I'm trying to figure out how else to put it so it's not, people don't feel that sensitive about it.
You can join me over here. I need some company. On the dark side, it's just isn't it just reality? Like in order to get the cycle moving again and to get more people into the market and more activity, you just need, the prices are too high. Like how in the world can people expect to sustain 100% appreciation in some parts of the country in 5? I mean, come on, folks, really? I mean, I'm willing to take a hit. I think it's one of those things where we all need to take a little bit of a hit, but continue.
Well, you're right. So, home prices, nationally are up cumulatively since the onset of the pandemic, like 45%, 45%. But there are many markets where they're much more than that. They're like up 70%, they're up 80%. When you look at the typical mortgage payment, even adjusted for inflation, it's 60, 70% higher than only a few years ago, right? And you're looking at the same exact home, and the mortgage payment is that much more. And that doesn't even account for insurance costs and property taxes that have gone up as well. So, we actually calculated out, we forecasted out that typical mortgage payment, and then, adjusted for expected decline in mortgage rates, and even like gave it a little bit more extra. Like, what if mortgage rates do come down to 5.5%? What does that mean? And you don't get to the levels of affordability that we've been over the last 20-year period, nowhere near. And so really what that means is that home prices would have to come down, it's at least some, in some markets, not all markets. I mean, you do still have markets where overall appreciation has actually remained in that long run range that we've had pre-pandemic of 4 to 5%. So it's not everywhere the same, but some markets are certainly overvalued, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it does depend on where you are, and it also depends on what data source you're looking at. And I heard you say something that really made me laugh when talking about data and numbers and what sources. In a previous podcast, you said something to the effect of, all these words have been used so much I don't even know what they mean anymore. You said that because people talk about appreciation, depreciation, numerators and denominators and all these things, and where it is true, pundits and armchair quarterbacks, there's a lot of us out there, I'm one of them, right, who takes a stand, grabs a chart, makes a comment. I can't tell you how many people have been very sensitive lately, more than ever, on sources. Hey, I wouldn't trust that source. I mean, I'm talking about charts that are out there regarding housing. For instance, let me give you an example, something that you recently disputed. I got from several publications that the average price of the first-time home buyer over the last 10 years has risen from 31 to 38. I heard you,
the average
age. Yeah, I heard you say recently that your data suggests that number is significantly lower. Where do we turn for the truth?
Well, so it's not that the way I see it is not that these sources are not truthful. They're truthful in what they're representing. So, if you have a survey and the survey respondents tend to skew older, survey respondents tend to skew maybe cash buyer, have more, it includes more cash buyers, it includes just generally different population versus some of the other data source. Naturally, you're going to have a different outcome in your numbers. So I wouldn't necessarily say that they're inaccurate or wrong. You just have to understand what is underneath this data. What is the source of the data? What does the source represent? Who is represented in that number? And and then you can sort of verify differences between numbers. And so so NAR has a median first-time home buyer age that has gone up quite a bit, and it's based on their survey. And I want to really, really emphasize that this is nothing about NAR or their survey, because I think their survey is very valuable. We don't have another survey in the country that asks the same type of questions, and that there's history for that long as NAR's home buyer and seller survey. What I just wanted to show is that when you look at different data sources, such as mortgage application data, which granted doesn't include cash buyers, it doesn't include, it tends to maybe skew in areas where you do have more, as a result, more people that buy with mortgages versus cash buyers. You will get naturally lower median first-time home buyer age. So, it just depends on who is the data representing.
I mean, I'm looking at something right now. I just Googled average age of first-time home buyers over the past 10 years. Says the average age of first-time home buyers in the U.S. has been steadily increasing over the past decade. In 2023, the median age was 35, up from 31 in 2013. The trend continues with the median age range reaching 38 in 2024, an all-time high according to the NAR, who you just mentioned. So I guess, has it gotten to the point where people shouldn't be grabbing charts and using them as gospel? Like, it's not enough to see a chart and a source. Now you actually have to do the work to see who was behind the chart. If that's the case, I'm going out of business. I'm coming to work for you. You need a janitor or something? Can I mow the lawn?
No, I mean, again, I think what is most important here is to understand is what the data is representing.
I know. I'm just playing around. It's not that someone's not telling the truth. It's that they're telling their own truth. You see the difference? Yeah.
No, it's the truth based on on the data that they're looking at.
Yeah.
Okay, let me give you another example. Case-Shiller, CoreLogic, we report on Case-Shiller. We also have our own Cotality home price index. They're not, large metro areas are not equally weighted. So in Case-Shiller, for example, you have a pretty heavy weight on larger metro areas such as Los Angeles. And so, you had the fires in wildfires in LA, and, it did put a pressure on some of the markets, especially higher priced markets in the region for a little while. And that led to a surge in home price appreciation. And that was reflected in Case-Shiller. So now, was that inaccurate? No, it wasn't inaccurate. It was just important to understand what's weighted in that overall index more versus less.
All right. Fair enough. I get it. So 5 months supply is normally considered to be a healthy balance. And people look at that and they go, oh, right now, supply is, 3 months or so. And maybe that's an unhealthy balance. But I know you've got a particular way that you look at the balance of housing and how it relates to the supply. Can you touch on that?
Well, so, this is another sort of interesting indicator to talk about, because it can elude different things. Month supply is it's an equation, right? It's a ratio of number of homes for sale divided by rate of home sales. When you have a rate of home sales slowing, you will naturally see the numerator dominate, and so you get the bigger number. And so now a month supply is higher, but it may not necessarily be higher because we just have more inventory. It may be higher because there's fewer home sales out there. So, so that's an important thing to keep in mind as well. Is it that inventory is actually really growing by that significant amount from like 3 months supply to 5 months supply, or is that home sales activity has slowed so much that has led to an increase in month supply?
Yeah, and we're at a very interesting time. Like there's so many different headwinds, and you have, immigration and all of these other things that are happening that are clouding really our ability to really know whether the economy's coming or going. And I heard you say you're in a wait and see period, that there's just you need some more clarity on the direction of the economy. It is slowing down. We know that, right? So is the question that's out there for you the degree to which it's slowing down, and when do you think you'll get clarity on that?
Yeah, I think it's mostly the degree to which it's slowing down because, like, for example, what happened with the labor market report was it recent for August 1st, and that really changed the perspective on what's happening in the economy, right? We thought we were adding X amount of jobs. It turns out that we're adding, less than half of that, which means that, at this rate, we could be maybe entering a recession at some point. We also found out in the inflation data that there are signs of inflation because of tariffs. Now, does that mean a one-time shock to prices or a longer-term price shock because companies are looking to change their supply sourcing, right? And so that is not clear. And then on top of that, what's also not clear is, what are really the tariffs? Because one day we have something, another day we don't, and things are so dynamic at the moment, and so it takes a little while for all of that to pass through the data points and really give us a clearer understanding of what the underlying momentum is.
Yeah, let's shift over to homeowners insurance. It is skyrocketing, right? There's the haves are supplementing to some degree the have-nots, the areas that are either now uninsured or are insured at much higher premiums, and at the same time we're seeing FHA loans, the delinquency rate is rising. So give us the lay of the land on the danger you see with rising homeowners and how that might continue to lead to higher delinquencies, and where.
Right. So there's a couple ways in which it's been impacting the housing market. One is that people are maybe, not aware of how high insurance is, and so they enter home buying process and they make an offer. They're all the way almost through with that home purchase, and then they get that statement before the closing, and they realize how much their mortgage payment in fact is because homeowner insurance is so high, and then the sale falls through. And we've actually seen more cancellations because of that, and more pending sales not going into the final sale because of that insurance shock. The other way in which it can work itself that has been impacting the housing market is you have an existing homeowner that was planning on a fixed mortgage payment and fixed amount in the escrow, and then they get a new bill for an escrow. That bill is double what it was, but they're on a fixed income and they cannot afford that. And then they're either lose their insurance or they get forced placed insurance and they can't afford that, and so it just becomes this perpetual sort of spiral down the I can't afford to keep this home anymore.
Or do I put food on my table or pay the mortgage? I mean, does Cotality have any precise data around the insurance dynamic and how it's impacting the market that you can share?
Yeah, we do. So the way we've been observing this is through actually escrow accounts. So in the escrow account, and we've observed it over time, and you're able to see how much um, uh, escrow amounts, I guess, and I wouldn't call them shortages yet, but escrow amounts have gone up. And so we've now noticed that more and more accounts are in shortage, and especially accounts in the areas where you have significant increases in insurance, like Florida, for example, like Texas, like California. Granted, these are large states, but they've also have been impacted by these issues. And so, for example, in Florida, we've seen escrow accounts going up some 57% over the last 4 years because of the increases in these costs that go into escrow, so insurance and property taxes. So yes, we are observing that, and we are observing it through escrow. We're also observing it through how it impacts mortgage delinquencies. You mentioned FHA delinquencies going up. And unfortunately, that segment of the population is most vulnerable because they usually are lower income. They're usually fixed income. And so for them, these increases, no matter how small they are, may be much larger relative to their budgets. So
how big of a threat is this, do you think, as we move down the next 6, 12, 18 months?
So one big advantage in this cycle is that we've had so much home price appreciation. So we've seen people, as a result of this, tap into their home equity to pay for some of these. The unfortunate group is the group that bought over the last couple of years and has actually lost equity in markets where home prices went down, and maybe are already finding themselves in negative equity as a result. And that's the group where we are seeing both a higher rate of negative equity and higher rate of mortgage delinquencies. But it's not widespread. We're not seeing it in the national numbers. It's very localized.
Mm. Well, and again, as we talk about the natural evolution of the housing cycle, and it's horrible that exists, and especially because the circumstances are extenuating, right? I mean, they're not normal circumstances for us to have all of these natural disasters to push prices up and to have some insurance companies, run for cover. Do you have an opinion on how you think the industry can mitigate the risk at this point? I mean, I've read some things about, not from you, but that it should be seen, escrow should now be seen as a higher risk category, that maybe DTI should be lowered a little bit or considered a little bit more. There should be less lax towards the high end of that. Do you guys ever put out opinions on that, and do you have one?
Well, the problem with natural disasters, with looking at with natural disasters being priced into cost of home ownership, is that it disproportionately affects those lower income households, right? And so you want to sort of even things out so that it's not, so that lower income households still have access to home ownership and can have a home and build that wealth. The problem that I see now is that people are increasingly, and especially lower income people, when you think about it, where natural disasters, for example, set aside the wildfires in LA, even though part of that wildfire did disproportionately impact lower income households. But when you think about North Carolina, Asheville area during the Helena hurricane, that was a lot of people who, first maybe didn't have insurance because they were not in the area that was considered like a high flood insurance area. So they didn't have insurance. And so as a result of that, they lost all the equity that they have in their home. And that was, for some people, all the wealth that they have. So I think we need to, if we're going to focus on home ownership being the primary wealth being mechanism, we need to figure out how to protect it for those people that are most vulnerable. And, so I don't have an opinion, like how does that work through the insurance mechanisms, but, just not having insurance or, areas being uninsurable, I don't think that that's the solution.
Yeah, for sure. And, one solution would be the government stepping in, but people don't like that, right? Like, what's that going to cost? How much will that, make the deficit go up? We're already heading to 40 trillion. Speaking of which, do you ever think about the deficit in this country? And do you have any hope that it'll ever be right sized and back to zero again?
I think that would be very, very difficult. And especially now with the big, beautiful bill, it seems like that's going to add significant additional cost to the deficit, increase the deficit. So, I don't.
Ain't happening, right? Maybe AI will get us. Yeah, well, but I mean, it does seem like a runaway train. For sure.
It does seem like a runaway train.
Maybe
yes.
we lead in AI, and maybe the tariffs stay in place because it is producing some decent revenue, right? The question is what happens with that revenue, and just how long can you keep it for? Because it's not good. It's not good for relations in the long haul, is my opinion. Here's a sensitive question. What grade does Dr. Selma Hepp from Cotality, formerly CoreLogic, give Chairman Jerome Powell on the job he's done?
Oh,
I'm sorry to ask you this, but I have to.
Yeah.
I have to ask for obvious reasons.
Yeah.
I'm not asking you to take any shots, but I mean, like Barry Habib, who's a very well-respected housing economist, has said that he's made some mistakes. He's miscalculated, and and should be held accountable for that, right? What are your pins? I'm trying to soften you up here to think, what, if other economists are speaking out, this is my turn to step out on Greg Sher's one-on-one and say this.
Look, I would not want to be in his position. He is caught between what do they call rock and a
hard
place. Yeah. You have now two mandates that he has that are moving in opposite direction, right? They've been so focused on getting the inflation back on target that, and amid everything else that was happening in the world with, supply chains and whatnot, that I think it's easy for us to judge, but it's not easy to do the job that they do.
What a politically correct answer. I love that.
Okay, so I personally have met Jerome Powell through some of the groups that I'm part of as an economist, and I will say him and the whole Federal Reserve board takes this very, very seriously. None of this is taken lightly, and they're a very thoughtful group of people. So I think they're trying very hard.
Well, prior to the election, there was was it a 50 bip cut?
Mm-hmm.
And some of the numbers were worse than they are now. And then we had rosy job numbers, which were later adjusted, and that's now happened again. I mean, does that make you, at the very least, like scratch your head and wonder what was behind that? What was the motivation, or do you think it's just business as usual?
Which, you mean the job revisions?
Well, just like the fact that there was a cut prior to the election, which was to spur the economy and and give it some more ammo, and then there were some jobs were great then, and then there was the election, and then there were revisions to those job numbers. Is that just par for the course, or could there be something nefarious going on there?
I don't believe it's nefarious. I mean, I think U.S. statistics is a gold standard. When you go to, think about, like, have you ever tried to look at home prices in any other country, that's not, well, outside maybe Australia, because Cotality is in Australia and we do an amazing job there. But, even in Europe, it's a first world countries, you try to find a good home price index there at the local level, at the city level. It's really, really hard, and let alone all the other stats that are important to run an economy. So, I still trust our system. I think it's not necessarily the problem okay, how do I put it? It's not necessarily a problem in trusting it. I think the problem is that the way the data is collected it's difficult because of the methods being used. So, surveys, as we, already talked about, surveys can be really skewy because it depends on who is answering the survey. And sometimes companies don't want to answer. Sometimes households don't want to answer. The survey is really, of BLS, for example, it's a really small survey of both businesses and households, because it's composed of two different surveys. And so naturally, you're going to have a really, really large revisions, because it's only like a sliver of U.S., a sliver of a sample of a U.S. Economy. So, I think we've always had large revisions. This is not the first time we've seen this. So that in itself, I think what I would focus more now is how do we enable these agencies to have better technology, and more resources to generate these numbers, versus taking budget away from them.
Yeah, or maybe expanding the survey. Like, if it's so small that the needle can be moved so significantly with a look back, maybe they need to broaden that picture. We're coming up.
And it's also about, so let me just add to
Yeah,
this. It's also about people not just, people nowadays just don't want to answer surveys anymore. Survey methods were developed during the time when people had, home phone, and you answered every phone call because you didn't, there was an excitement about that phone call. Now you have a cell phone, and it's a potential scam, and you don't have a home phone, you're not going to answer it. And so people just don't. This is not just about this particular survey. This is about any survey out there having challenges with response rates.
Well, that's interesting, and I don't know anything about the question I'm about to ask you. It's probably silly, but why wouldn't the government just take 30% of the largest, or take the largest companies in America that represent, let's say, 30% of the workforce, and force them to report in accurate numbers, or else then you'd have a massive sampling that would be more accurate. Is there such a thing out there, or is that just a dumb idea? You can be honest. Dumb idea. You're thinking dumb idea, aren't you? It's okay. Yeah.
There is no dumb ideas.
It wouldn't be my first dumb idea. It wouldn't be my first dumb idea. All right. Do you have an opinion on that?
Every idea is a good idea. It's just, every idea has, every method has challenges and, benefits and disadvantages. So I think there would be something about that method as well that, you can't, it's hard to force, providing maybe a carrot in exchange for data would work, but usually forcing both household, we're not a police, hopefully we won't get there being a police state.
Yeah, how about if you don't give us these numbers, we're going to raise your corporate taxes. How about that? So we can get these numbers.
That would go really well.
Whatever. I mean, we need better numbers. I mean, you say that, but look at the impact these decisions have on the economy and companies and policy, most importantly, where we don't find out that the numbers that we're making these decisions on weren't even accurate until months later. It's a problem. They have to do something about it. We're getting close to the end, I promise.
Okay.
I recently created a post on LinkedIn about foreign entities gobbling up land in the United States, and how we don't have any governors in place, certainly relative to China and India and the UK and some of these other countries that have pretty extreme measures. Like, it takes literally an act of Congress times 10 to get a residential property in China. And then it's not even freehold, it's leasehold. I mean, you got to live there for a year. You can only get one property. There's all these conditions. Meanwhile, China can turn around and gobble up 15, 20, 50,000 properties, a year or every couple of years without hardly any limitations. I get pushback on that. Hey, foreign investors is only 1% to 2% of, new home purchases. You're not looking at the right thing. And to me, I think in the last 12 months, it's something like 78,000 properties. And again, you might say, what's the source you've got, right? So we go back to the source thing. But the bottom line is it's tens of thousands of properties are being purchased by foreign entities in this country. Meanwhile, we have affordability crisis. And when those countries come in unabated, they're able to pay cash in a lot of instances, to pay more than even what people want to win the properties, which does two things. It boxes out the first-time home buyer, and it makes it even harder because the prices go up. Those are the comps that are used. So I think one property is too much, especially in an environment like this. I get a lot of pushback that it was those countries, many countries that helped us get through the financial crisis. They came in and gobbled those things up, but that, to me, they were just opportunistic. They knew they were getting houses on pennies on the dollar. So what is your opinion on this?
It's a difficult one because, like you said, I'm guessing you're talking about institutional investors. We do have data on investor activity, and we segment it by size of the investor. And in fact, institutional investors are rather small share compared to mom and pop investors. They are the majority of investor activity. But we've seen institutional investor share go up over time, and in some markets they are dominant buyer, I guess, in the market. But where I was going with that, sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Well, that's all right, and I'm throwing a lot at you, but there's a lot of data out there.
Well, there is. So I guess where I was going is, about coming out of the great financial crisis, is that investors were the ones who put the floor under home price decline because they came in and bought, all of these foreclosure properties you're talking about. So there is a role of investors, and to some extent they are in the market right now too, in these markets, especially in Florida, where you do see rather rapid home price declines. Investors come in, and help put a floor under home price decline. So there is a role. I mean, I would say that, in some markets that are crowding out first-time home buyers because there's so many of them, but those tend to also be the markets that are very high new construction growth markets. So you have just the overall lot of activity in those markets, both new construction, both population growth, both job growth. So, there is a purpose for them as well. Now, the markets that are undersupplied and you cannot get access to housing for first-time home buyers, yes, that's a bigger issue.
How much reading do you do? Are you constantly looking at numbers and stats and charts and PDFs and Excel spreadsheets?
Kind of, yeah.
You have to be unbelievable at that at putting together an Excel spreadsheet. Like a presentation. I mean, like a PowerPoint. Yeah.
Well, I don't know. You're the judge. You've seen my presentation.
I mean, I love it. That is true. Yeah. But I mean, it's easy for you. It's like second nature. How often are you asked to speak, like to go on the road, and how you can't say yes to everybody, but I'm just curious in your position.
Okay, so to give you an example, in 1 year, we generally spend about every third day on the road. So 120 out of 350 days, we're doing something. Maybe it's a virtual presentation, maybe it's in-person presentation, but it's some sort of engagement.
My goodness. Marriott or Hilton?
Marriott.
What's your preference? Me too. Me too. That's unbelievable. We both love Marriott.
Yeah, and it's not even, I don't even know how I defaulted to that. It's not like,
you know what it is? It's the beds and the pillows. You go to a Hilton, you're 50-50. Like you can get the worst pillows, the hardest bed. Marriott has a higher hit rate. Now you can go to some Marriotts that aren't great, by the way. You can end up in a Marriott and you're like, this looks like a Hilton to me. Listen, before we go, I want you to plug yourself here. You said you were about to do a monthly piece, so tell people how they can follow you and continue to support your incredible work at Cotality.
Well, thank you. Thanks for that. Well, first and foremost, Cotality, it's on our Cotality.com is our website, and under Insights portion of our website, it's where a lot of the Office of Chief Economist data analysis get posted. I'm personally active on LinkedIn, and I've started a newsletter on LinkedIn. So if you want to subscribe to the newsletter, yeah. So yeah, but we do a lot of other social media interaction. Other people within Cotality do many other. I've just, there's so much out there that it takes too much time if you're spending all your time on social media. So I've decided LinkedIn is the one for me.
Do you ever see any of my posts?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I do.
You think so?
Yeah,
Especially
I'm not the one where you do selfies.
I don't do that. I'm not the selfie guy. You don't see my stuff. I have to do better work to get on your radar. But I will tell you that I'm an abundance guy. You don't have to do anything for me. I'm gonna totally support your newsletter, and I'm gonna get you at least. My commitment to you is I will get you a minimum of 100 new subscribers by the end of the week. What do you think about that? If I can pull that off, will that be impactful for you?
Absolutely.
Let's go. And you let me know if I do. Let me know. Okay. Let me know if I pull it off. Okay.
Sounds good.
Dr. Hepp. Do people call you doctor?
Sometimes, yeah, but mostly as a joke.
But you are you're a doctor.
I'm a doctor. Yeah. Yes.
So
doctor, give me
give me the news. I gotta. Wow, we are so dating ourselves. That was like that was an '80s track there. It takes two to make a thing go right. Oh, never mind. Selma, thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, it was such a pleasure.
I'll see you in 30 more years when you're celebrating 60 years in the U.S. Have a great Monday, everybody. We'll see you next Monday on One-on-One. Our guest next Monday, the very one, the guy, Rob Chrisman. We love Rob Chrisman. I've never interviewed him before, so we'll turn the tables on Rob, who normally interviews everyone else, and that's it. Appreciate it. Have a great week, everybody. Bye-bye.